it was a lot of fun. It was, that's a lot of questions.
Good. Very bright.
And we've had some, I don't even know how to do the first dance.
Okay, I'm going to get us started. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank everyone for being here today, and we are continuing. Can you hear me? Okay, I'll move in closer. We're continuing with our hybrid meeting method, and I appreciate all of you who showed up in person as well as attending virtually today. I'm going to start with one announcement that I'm sure may delight many of you. Our December 2nd meeting is canceled. Okay, as it's only 2 weeks from today, combined with the Thanksgiving holidays next week, there was no significant business for us to address. Sandra will follow up with an email to all council membership as well. Okay, so first order of business today, the October 21st meeting minutes. These were posted with our agenda online. Are there any corrections to the minutes? I have a motion to approve. Thank you. A second? Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. All the minutes are approved. And just a quick reminder, the attendance sheets for those of you in the room are being circulated. Please initial. As in the past, those on Zoom, your attendance is being noted with your screen name. And as always, I ask when you ask a question after the presentations, please be sure to state your name and department or school. So with that, we're going to begin with our first presentation today. This is regarding a planned curated website related to Duke's values in action. Lee Goller will present. She is the Chief Audit, Risk, and Compliance Officer at Duke. In many ways, this is a refresh of what was previously known as Duke's Code of Conduct. ECAC has met with Lee over the last year in the spring and in the fall, as well as individual meetings with the former chair of Academic Council, Carrie Haney, and with myself to discuss the website and the motivations for pulling together all of Duke's policies into one curated and all-encompassing website. And I should say, having such a website should make it easier for all of us to find the policies and principles that shape Duke's culture and interactions amongst us, while aligning with Duke's values of excellence, trust, inclusion, respect, and discovery. With that, Lee, I'm going to turn the podium over to you.
That's correct.
Carlos, you'll let me know if I have the mic adjusted well enough. Yep, super. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. Okay. Just a few comments before we do a demonstration of what Values in Action looks like on its publication website, and this is still the development website. So when we have everything finalized over the next couple of weeks, this will transfer over to the values.duke.edu main site as part of the combined package of our values and our code of conduct. So just a couple of thoughts. First is that you may ask, why did we need the refresh? And it was more a matter of want as well as need. The previous code of conduct was written about 20 years ago and looked very much and acted very much like it was written 20 years ago. The prevailing model at that time was to focus on a rules-based format, predominantly focused on laws and regulations, and with a very heavy compliance attitude and stance. Since then, culture has become a much more important and vital element of how we think about our behaviors, our actions, and our responsibilities to one another. So this refresh was a combination of refocusing and aligning with the value statement that came out 2 years ago, as well as to curate a broader set of resources that serve to bolster that foundation. So back in January, President Price asked asked me to convene a group of colleagues that could help to redefine and refresh what this would look like and make it a more relevant, actionable, and modern version of our shared expectations for one another. We did that with a group of 8 folks, including myself. We had 4 faculty representatives and 4 administration representatives. I do want to take a moment and acknowledge the work of that group by naming them individually. It was a significant lift to go through and find all the ways in which we could improve upon this. So we have Nan Jokerst, Mary Frances Luce, Gita Swami, Ann Brown, Kate Hendricks and Neera Skirky from Counsel's Office, Antoine Lofton from Staff and Labor Relations, Rhonda Brandon, Chief HR Officer for the health system, Colleen Shannon, my compliance counterpart for the health system, and Lisa McLam in my office, who made this vision come to life as a website with the help from folks in Mike Schoenfeld's office. So just a huge lift on everyone's part, and I have a sincere gratitude for all the work and effort of those individuals, as well as the dozens of readers and commenters and feedback that came along the way over the course of about 6 months of going back and forth on iterations for what finally you see here today. So just a few things to keep in mind as we go through the demonstration. One is that we have moved from a rules-based to a principles-based approach. We are curating and summarizing key aspects of our policies and then providing links to the detailed supporting content. We hopefully, fingers crossed, have made this easy to access, and once it's published on values.duke.edu, widely accessible to our community. And finally, we hope it encourages questions, not just reporting of concerns, but the asking of questions to help provide clarity and to really head off issues before they become serious. In other words, folks in my office and resources there are available for those questions and to help guide and navigate to the individuals that have the deeper subject matter and content knowledge. The way the site is organized, it's very much like most of our main Duke pages now. It is a long scroll, so I'll quickly show you. It's a long scroll, but the idea is that it is curated into these 3 parts. The first is how we interact with one another and what's a safe workplace environment, how we do business with one another. That's business being used more broadly. And then finally, how we are stewards of the assets of Duke at the university and the health system. We have 22 distinct areas that we have curated information for, and we'll just quickly we'll pick one here: physical facilities and workplace environment. Once you're on top of any one of these buttons, it will turn colors. With a click, you go to that section. The dark blue boxes in each section are a high-level principle statement that is aspirational as well as expectation in nature. And then it's followed by a collection of policies and principles. So those are our official position as Duke. And with a find out more section, which provides additional guidance, resources, and finally, the ability to ask a question or share a concern. At any point, you can re-navigate to the table of contents. You can re-navigate to the top and start over. Or you can download the PDF, which I will admit right now is a bit clunky. We're still working on that part of it to make it nice and pretty when it downloads. But once you download it and save it to your computer or save it to a file, all of the links remain active there. So as long as you open this PDF, you can still receive the links even if you're not connected. Well, you still have to be connected to the internet. But it is a way to download this and be able to share it in a way that's additional to sharing the website link. I'd be happy to take questions on any of the way that we've organized the information, any aspects of the content, or anything else that we can provide some insight or highlight aspects that are important to you.
Does it have searchable functions?
It does have a searchable function, and I have to admit, I just learned how to do this. So as long as you're using Chrome, and right now, since I'm not on my computer, I'm not going to try this. But if you open in the top, the three little buttons here in Chrome, if you click that, you may search on terms using that. We do not have a search box built into the site yet, but that is a future functionality that I think will be important, and we'll prioritize that as part of its usefulness. Thank you, Raphael. Yes.
I'm Ann West from neurobiology. I guess it's just that when you ask a question or report a concern, when you click on that button, I mean, the way you raised it, it was like, hey, if you had a question about how to find something, you could ask a question. But it's interesting that when you go to this next page, it says speak up reporting. So it says ask a question, but this seems very compliance-like, you know, since you were saying you were trying to take a value stand instead of a compliance stand. It sounds like if you see something wrong, push this button, but you said if you want to ask a question. So I was curious why this page looks the way that it does.
I am glad that you brought that up. That is something that we can add some additional language here to say it is okay to call and ask a question. That has not, because our old code of conduct did not have that functionality. We have not yet added it here, but I have a note to do that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, maybe not titling it speak up reporting. I mean, that seems very different than with the way that you sound like you want it to work.
We need it to do both. And so I will, let me give some thought to how we can title this to where we are encouraging individuals to raise concerns when they want a confidential or anonymous reporting mechanism, but more importantly, to ask questions early and often. But we do need both to be relevant and to be highlighted. So I take your point well. Thank you so much.
Just call it questions and concerns.
Or have two different links. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, just ask a question, report a concern. Okay?
Questions or concerns? Clearly, there's a lot.
All right, good.
Why don't we go?
Sure.
First one, two, just name.
Scott Lindroth, Music Department. On the very top page, in the second paragraph, there are a list of links. And I wonder, are those going to continue in the final version that's released?
I'm sorry, could you
On
point me?
the very top page, when you go to the WordPress site, that we were given that link. And then that second paragraph, there's a list of links there. Are those going to continue to be used?
Yes, they are. So we wanted to make sure that as you're reading, if you wanted to click on any one of these, it would go to those locations. But the documents are also part of the resource materials that are in a combination of policies and principles and find out more as well.
So when you click on institutional policies, and then you get another page where one of the links is student policies. And in the list of student policies, I saw things like endowment spending, corporate records, academic appointments. And I wondered, I didn't understand how those were part of student policies. So
I'll have to look into that for you. Thank you.
Justin Wright, biology. So the grad school, a grad student did a great job developing a reporting tool that now the grad school has sort of taken in on their own. And the functionality of that is very nice because it sort of gets to this concern. It basically says you might be coming here at a whole different places in your trajectory of concern. You know, you just want to ask a question, you want to report. And one of the challenges with Duke is that, not Duke in particular, there are just so many different ways in which something can go wrong, and it's not clear. Do you talk to the ombudsperson? Do you talk to OIE? And it really walked people through that. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that resource and have looked at its functionality and considered how that might play into your concerns page.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I have looked at that resource and I agree. It is an extraordinary work. It is very much geared to students. So we would need to repurpose some of that to make it broadly applicable across all Duke entities and all Duke affiliations. But I do very much like what they have done. I agree.
Very much. It's a Thompson Writing Program. My question or comments along the line of Justin's. I'm looking at the speaking up reporting part section of the reporting page, and it makes me think of some conversations we've had about situations in which somebody feels like something is not right with the way they or a colleague or another student have been treated, but they feel that it would be easy for them to be recognized given the small number of people in that unit or demographic. And I think if I was someone in this situation and I didn't already have experience with this, and I went to this page that says, contact your department head, academic dean, et cetera, it wouldn't be clear to me that, and I'm guessing the best thing for me to do would be maybe go to the ombudsman first, who would be completely independent and neutral and help me think about that. But I'm imagining a lot of people don't know what that is, or even that would be a route. So maybe it's worth thinking about if there's a way to explicitly acknowledge people who don't want to fill out a form because they don't know where that information is going, but could be directed to a safe place first that could help them figure that out.
I really appreciate that idea, and I have worked with each one of the ombuds to make sure they understand what the Speak Up program is, how the information is processed when it comes in, and to give them tools and resources to be successful in talking with folks to determine what, is this a question that can be answered through the ombuds or navigated to other resources? But we can continue to highlight that as a really effective first place for advice. Absolutely. Good, thank you so much.
Our next agenda item is a presentation of the climate survey. And this climate survey was distributed earlier this year to all faculty, staff, and students. And a message went out earlier today from President Price that provided some insights into the climate survey. But we will hear greater detail today from Kim Hewitt, Vice President for Institutional Equity and Chief Diversity Officer, and Abbas Ben Mamoun, Vice Provost for Faculty Advancement. I should note that this is the first time we've ever had a survey that has also gone out to Duke staff. And so this, there's a lot of data in the survey, and we're asking a lot of Kim and Abbas today to walk us through this. So I'm gonna let the two of you.
While we're waiting, has the sign up sheet gone across the other side of the room yet?
Thank you, Erica. And Abbas and I are going to share some highlights from survey results, and also importantly talk about some of the plans as we go forward to address the data and to provide support locally for unit leaders and department leaders to understand what the data means for them and how it can attach to local goals to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so a lot of work has gone into this. Of course, we had lots of support around it. I'm also going to share some information about the Racial Equity Advisory Council, which is one mechanism that we're going to be using to try to manage and support the momentum around the racial equity goals that were initially outlined by the president back in June. So, thank you. So just first, just a little overview of the progress and where we are. The survey, as Erica indicated, was deployed last spring for staff, faculty, and students. And importantly, this was the first time that we collected this kind of information from the staff. The Office for Institutional Research was just a key partner. David Jameson Drake, the Associate Vice Provost, is here today, and they have been performing ongoing data analysis and working with some leaders already and others to access more information specifically about your local area, and also just to begin to think about how you interpret the data. Human Resources has similarly put together a task force to help support staff units on individual or local data information and developing plans to support them. And Abbas will share more about the plans in the Office for Faculty Advancement. And then, as I mentioned, the creation of the Racial Equity Advisory Council, which is comprised of institutional leaders, students, staff, and faculty members that are part of 4 subcommittees. And we're going to talk a little bit about each of those subcommittees and some information that came out of the climate survey that has helped us to identify some key priorities for this first year. So the subcommittee, there are 4 subcommittees, importantly one on climate and assessment, which is led by Merlise Clyde and Sherilyn Black, I think both of whom are on the call today. And they've been spending a lot of time together just looking at the data, unpacking it, thinking about where there are opportunities to fill in the information or use other tools. And then there is a subcommittee on education and training, led by Leanne Royster, who's an assistant vice president in the Office for Institutional Equity, and Charmaine Royal, who many of you all know. Communications, led by faculty member Mark Anthony Neal and Rob Odom, who leads communication health system. And then Abbas and I are leading a subcommittee on infrastructure and policy, which all of these subcommittees are interrelated, but ours will really think about the capacity to implement recommendations that will come out of the other 3. And then, of course, we know there's all sorts of ongoing efforts throughout the institution to address racial equity. So when we started to think about doing a climate survey, which was really an idea that was talked about in Living While Black, if we go all the way back to the summer of 2020, we put together this steering committee and then a working group comprised of faculty and staff leaders who looked at many different instruments to think about what we wanted to use here at Duke. And Tomi Akinjemiyu, who is an epidemiologist in Duke Population Health Services, had deployed a survey that's really an iteration of what we ultimately selected, which is partly based on an instrument at the University of Michigan and Stanford. So the survey invited participants to reflect on sort of 5 areas. First, their perceptions of the overall perceptions of the institution, and the perceptions of the respondent's own unit or department or program, and then individual or interpersonal experiences. There's several questions about what kind of resources would be useful to people. And then we were excited that over half of the respondents provided qualitative data in response to a question about what they think Duke is doing well in the area of diversity, equity, inclusion, and where Duke could improve. So in terms of the response rates, we had over 12,000 respondents. The staff participation rate was 53%, faculty 40%, and students 24%. And again, a nod really to David and his team in terms of various layered efforts to try to reach out to the staff community in particular, which included even going out with hard copies of the survey. So this is definitely an opportunity next time around to think about how do we best access that community to have an even better response rate. And similarly with students, we think that the timing, and that's also, staff and faculty are surveyed more often, the time of year that we deployed the survey, those things probably we suspect were barriers to the percentage of students. But these are things that we will definitely be thinking about as we go forward the next time we deliver this survey. So I just want to share a few highlights from that first chunk about overall satisfaction with the institution, and just want to mention that these data are broken down into 4 racial categories. So Black, white, Hispanic, and Asian. And, I think an important project plan for the future is to think about how we can have some disaggregated data by race. So we've already started to kind of look at some peers that have done some work in that area. And likewise, these questions and these results are based on a binary gender. So we just have results for men and women. But importantly, we want to think about how we can reflect more of a range or of gender identities. So I'm sure many of you probably took a look or hopefully took a look at the message today in the website that shows some information about the results. But generally, we saw unevenness, in particular where communities of color reported lower degrees of satisfaction with different aspects of the survey questions. And likewise, we saw those kind of differences between men and women. So this first slide here shows The percentages of respondents who indicated that they were very satisfied or satisfied with the racial and ethnic diversity of the unit leadership. And, as I indicated, we can see here lesser degrees of, lower degrees of satisfaction in the Black community in particular, under 50% for all three constituent groups, and, the lowest there in terms of how Black faculty responded to this question. The greatest degree of satisfaction on this question is among Asian staff members, but these sort of variances differed by categories and race. So this next graph is, again, the degree to which respondents were satisfied or very satisfied with the racial and ethnic diversity of the faculty. And at the last academic council meeting, Sally talked with you about the faculty satisfaction survey, and Abbas can share more about the efforts there, which, we have seen some successes, but obvious opportunities for more work in this space. And I should also mention that David's team did take a look at the results of this survey and generally saw, similar patterns with respect to the faculty in the faculty survey and then the Duke Climate Survey on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And then, as I mentioned, we where there was sort of some similar degrees of satisfaction between men and women across hiring, we saw lesser degrees of satisfaction for women with respect to the commitment to promoting women. And again, another, as we continue to unpack this data and leaning again on both Cheryl and Marlee's subcommittee, but David's office as well, we want to be able to understand some of these intersections of identity, which will be important to see, for example, what are the experiences of women of color. This next graph, again, is showing the degree to which community members agree about the climate. And so the questions about climate and opportunities sort of similarly showed patterns where you had less agreement among members of the Black and Hispanic community. Similarly, we saw lower rates of satisfaction in the LGBTQ community and differences between men and women. And here we see the response to this question. I feel that the climate for women is at least as good as that for men. And you can see here that the reporting is lower for respondents who identified as women in terms of the degree to which they agree or strongly disagree. I'm going to pass it over to Abbas.
As Kim mentioned, we have disaggregated data and academic units where appropriate to be able to see the data. So your unit should be able to drill down further and get the details so that you can develop an action plan to deal with that. And we have committees, subcommittees, particularly the committee chaired by Marlee, who is here sitting at the back. Thank you, Marlee. And Charlene Black, who will be developing also ways to engage with the academic units, to work with them, to partner with them. So the next slide will show you the data about perceptions of equity in the unit. So here we see, sorry, I think that is, there we go. So this one here, we see concerns about people's comfort expressing their views. So we see disparities between groups. Black faculty and students feel less comfortable expressing their views without being dismissed or attacked. So this is clearly linked to whether people feel that they belong and that they can trust each other, that their views will be respected, and that will be viewed as legitimate views to be aired. On the faculty side, we know this is an issue about how research by underrepresented faculty is perceived sometimes as radical, as a niche area, not as something that is core, that is advancing theoretical debates and advancing fields. So this is a question about perception about other faculty. But there is also an issue here about that higher education is struggling with, how we ensure that we continue to be places for vigorous debates, because that's how we can advance and how we can foster that kind of ethos in our community and in our students. So this is something important for us to look at. And again, we will be able to access the disaggregated data. The other issue that we see, and this is again, it comes up in a number of surveys, including the 5-year survey that Sally talked about at the last academic council meeting, and that is criteria for advancement and promotion. We hear complaints, and they are reflected in the survey as well, that there is a lack of clarity about the guidelines that already exist, but also there is some lack in some places in opportunities for advancement. We see this graph, we see this from faculty as well. And this is going to be a priority for the infrastructure committee to make sure that the policies we have in place are clear and are accessible to people, but also that we work with academic leaders to make that as a priority for their community, for the people they work with. This is, again, it's about compensation. And we see, again, here some disparities in how people feel about how they are compensated for their work. Hispanic, for example, faculty. Faculty. Sorry, I mean, faculty and staff, black faculty and staff, where there is a sentiment that they are being underpaid. And this is, again, we do one for faculty. We have some ways to look at equity in the units. But this is something that probably we need to broaden and look at other groups. Again, drilling down is going to be very important. For example, among the faculty, we have to look at appointments by category, by type, but by gender identity, by different groups. So this is something for us to look at, and we have some mechanisms in place to deal with that. So we need to make it a priority. We're going to talk about interpersonal experiences. And this is, again, this is really about climate and culture, and particularly lived experiences at the local level. So one question was, in the past year, how often have you experienced microaggressions? And here, it is really, the data is quite something for us to be concerned about. As you can see here, large number of people feel that they have experienced microaggressions. So this is a climate and culture issue, and we are going to see more of this data as well. Last year, how often have you experienced microaggressions? And if you look at our Black community here, that is quite alarming data here. And this is consistent. For example, Stanford just released its own survey of its community, and the results, especially on microaggressions, they are somewhat similar to what we are seeing here. So this is just about truth. This is an issue of climate and culture and how we treat each other. So we need to make sure that we address this. So we're intentional about this. And this is something that actually we can do, because this is about how we treat each other, what we, as members of this community, are willing to tolerate from people around us, how to treat other people as well, in various spaces, whether it is in our classrooms, whether it is in our labs, in our offices, in halls, and all those places, social spaces, what we are allowed to do. So this is not just how you treat other people, but also when you see people in this community. So I think this is really not just a question of deploying more resources, though that's probably needs to be done, or training leaders, though that may needs to be done, but it's really on us as individual members of this community. Make sure that we treat everybody with respect and that they are full-fledged members of this community. Discrimination and microaggressions, of course, have impact. And we know that there is research that shows that impact extends beyond productivity, that may even have some detrimental health effects on individuals. But as you can see here, there is clearly a sentiment, particularly within the members of our Black community. There is an impact on their productivity and the interactions at work. So we are making some progress on hiring, particularly Black faculty. For example, last year units did a decent job, and there is a lot of good progress that we can build on. But we cannot hold on to people if they don't feel that they are valued here, that they are treated well here. That is a place for them to flourish and thrive, and that they should make this as their community. So this is again for us to think about and be more intentional about. And then in terms of areas of discrimination or microaggressions, and here we say sex, and as Kim said, in future surveys, we need to do more on gender identity to make sure that we desegregate by different categories. Also in terms of racial and ethnic identity and age as well. Ageism is also an issue that surfaced in the survey and that we need to pay attention to as well. Now, so what they think would be most useful to them. And if you look at that, that is actually not surprising. People want opportunities for social interaction. Now, we took this during the pandemic, that may factor, but it's more than that. Because you see this surfacing in other places as well. People really crave that sense of community. But it is a community that respects you, that values you. So you see opportunities for social interactions between members of the department. So again, this is for chairs, for academic leaders, to foster that sense of community. There are some ways to do this that are not really, that don't require lots of heavy lifting. There may be some areas where that may be the case, but it's really just create a good social environment, community environment for academic units. And there are some units that are doing it well. And that is another thing that we are going to do, and the Merlis and the Charlene's committee are going to do, to drill down and look which units actually are doing a good job at this that can be used as a model for the others. So that we can build on their success, work with them, see what they are doing well, something that we can scale and generalize to other units. People also look for active learning opportunities. Active learning meaning that they are sitting there, they are interacting with each other, they are learning together. And that is something that we are trying to do in our office as well, not just somebody coming and talking to you, but it is really a more active opportunity for you to contribute and also share, learn from others as well. And other ways to develop resources, seminars, books, articles, mediation. And the education committee will be looking at this to see how we can develop some effective resources for the members of our community. We also ask people to rank various areas by priority. And it's not surprising, people want to see more demographic diversity here at Duke. And you see this from the faculty, from staff, and from students as well. But you also see there is, especially on the student side and the staff side, accountability and enforcement. Interesting when you look at it, the difference between students, staff, and faculty on that one. But on the retention and promotion pathways, you see that faculty and staff see that as another high priority for us. So again, we can take this data and to inform our decisions, our next steps. And speaking of next steps, that's what Kim is going to talk about now.
So as I mentioned, we formed this Racial Equity Advisory Council, which is really made up of the deans and some vice presidents and a few other leaders. That's really for the purpose of taking the recommendations that come from these 4 subcommittees and identifying strategies to make them feasible. And the foundation for this structure was to build some structure around the racial equity goals that have been outlined by the president in the Juneteenth announcement. Really think about how we maintain the momentum and to develop a system of accountability that's clear and easy for anyone who wants to understand what the trajectory is to see. We looked at each of those commitments in the Juneteenth message and tried to map them on to each of these 4 areas. And then after looking at the initial result of the survey, we looked at those results to similarly think about how we could derive some key priorities for each of the subcommittees from the results that we see. So things like clarity for pathways to promotion. How do we look at opportunities for education and training around racial equity? The council met in June really just to have a session to think about what is the purpose of the council vis-a-vis these subcommittees. And then in this process of identifying the membership, we asked for feedback from the deans, from ECAC, and from others. And we really wanted to think about balance in terms of expertise, identity, and all of those things. And then we also thought the involvement of students was important. And so last spring, through a process that happens in the Provost's office, students were invited to apply based on their interest and their background for either the council or one of the 4 subcommittees. And then we also hired a senior program coordinator to work with us on, administrative support, but also to do some special projects that would be associated with each of the 4 subcommittees. And then each person was asked to make a 2-year commitment to this process. Are we doing okay with the time? Okay. And, importantly, we wanted to have a strong presence of faculty participation in these subcommittees. So we've talked many times about the climate and assessment subcommittee, which has probably been the most active so far. Each of the co-chairs we've met together 3 or 4 times so far this year, since the beginning of this school year. But really the job of the climate assessment group will be to understand the data, look for opportunities for additional data collection, think about the appropriate supports that will be needed to advise leaders and others to use the data to advance their own goals and to understand the opportunities for development in their local areas. And then to work collaboratively with the other 4 subcommittees and to support the work of the other subcommittees. And just quickly, these are the members of the subcommittee. Again, we tried to make sure we had an undergraduate student and at least 1 undergrad and 1 professional or a graduate student on the committee, and a balance of staff with relevant roles and faculty. So this next area, education, curriculum, and training, we kind of recognize this is a huge area, and we decided to really kind of break that down into 2 sections. One that would really focus on the curriculum and how do we infuse notions of racial equity throughout the curriculum, and then thinking about training and education for students, staff, and faculty. So one of the key priorities that this subcommittee identified was the need for some kind of an audit or a mapping of what is even available at Duke. We get that question all the time. Do you have a map of all the training and education opportunities around diversity, racial equity? And really to identify where there's overlap, where there's need, what are some best practices? So that'll be a big project for the program coordinator who's working with this structure. And then again, to look for gaps and opportunities, explore ways to be in relationship with departments that are thinking about how they want to make their own curriculum equitable. And again, I think we have so much work and activity happening at Duke that we don't often know what's happening, and there's overlap and we can learn from one another. And this is an enterprise-wide project. So we really want to think about how we can build connections with the health system. And I think there are things that happen there that could inform us and vice versa. So Leanne Royster, who's kind of a new-ish Assistant Vice President, Office for Institutional Equity, will be sort of leading the efforts around training. And then Charmaine Royal, who is faculty and the leader of the Center for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, will be overseeing the curriculum efforts. So communications, one of the things we really have been thinking about, even in the process of developing the website and sending a message about the climate survey, is how the different members of our community are in relationship with the university. So for those of us, like in the people in this room, we feel a real sense of connection to the university and that we have a relationship. But in particular, there are probably members of our staff who have a very different kind of a relationship to the university. So really thinking about how we message differently to different constituent groups and differently within these sort of broader areas, and how we communicate our values and how we use communication to be more transparent and to hold ourselves accountable for this work. So this area is being led again by Mark Anthony Neal and Ralph Odom, and these are the members of that subcommittee. Now I will turn it back to Boss.
The last subcommittee in the infrastructure and policy. This one is, people tell us that they want to see systemic structural change that can be sustained over the long term. So this committee is going to be taking recommendations from the other subcommittees and also come up with priorities for us to forward to the leadership of the university. So we'll also evaluate the specific needs, issues of promotion, rank and various things that we can do for various groups here at Duke. The other thing is transparency and accountability. And we hear this quite a bit from people. We want to be transparent and we want to hold each other accountable, all of us. So we will work on developing reports every academic year that talks about the policy development and resources needed for each goal. And also we will be developing, this committee will be developing some kind of report card for units to report at the end. And the plan is for us to make all these things available to you on the website that President Price shared with you earlier today in his message. So this is an opportunity for us to involve all the community in these efforts, so that they see what we are doing and we can learn from the community about where we need to put our resources and our attention. And the members of this committee are, colleagues who are in a position to think about where we need to place our efforts and our energy over the short and the long terms. The other thing, sorry. Now, with regard to the path forward, before doing this, let me just mention something, because I have been here at Duke now, just a little over 4 years. When you do these kinds of surveys, the results can be a little bit unsettling, but actually Duke is really, compared to many other institutions, is really being bold here, in my view, being honest with itself and saying, look, in order for us to maintain our prominence, our academic excellence, we need to make sure that everybody feels valued and they have the opportunity to contribute to advancing the mission of this institution. And I think we are doing that. We are some of the few institutions now that have done a survey for staff and faculty and students. So I think there's a lot of positive here that we can build on to move the institution forward. For example, just on the faculty hiring, Duke is making good progress in diversifying its faculty. So that is a good thing that we can build on. And the credit here goes to the faculty who serve on search committees, to chairs who oversee searches, to deans who oversee those searches, and to the leadership of the university that is investing in those efforts. So there's something for us there to build on, but we need a good climate, a good environment for the people that we have and the people who are already here. So in that spirit, in January 2022, right after the beginning of the new year, January 4th, for academic leaders, chairs, deans, associate deans, and whoever they decide to come to this, they want to come to this retreat. So we will do this retreat for academic, a day-long retreat in Washington, Duke. We will dig into the survey. We will work with units on their own results and start developing some action plans for units. And this effort will be led by Sherilyn Black, who is on the call. I don't know whether Sherilyn can speak a little bit and tell you a little bit about what we are planning to do. If not, we just post the program and we encourage leaders to participate in this. And I know that HR is going to be developing something along the same lines for staff. And I'm sure Mary Pat McMahon and Gary Bennett are working on the student side of things. They're already doing some curricular innovations, some changes in the curriculum, and they will be doing more, I'm sure, and you'll hear from that in the future. And we are available here. Please do reach out to us. We want you to be partners in these efforts. And many thanks for the opportunity to share the results with you.
A lot of Q&A. Gary, I will call you in 1 second. We just have one question that came in while you were presenting, and I think it's a quick answer. And I don't know if you want to come up here too, so you can respond via the mic. It was just asking whether contingent faculty survey our contingent faculty, were they surveyed and included in the task force?
Oh, in the
Yeah.
steering committee? That the group that developed the survey instrument?
No, being included in these groups, committees that you're constituting now.
The subcommittees.
Yeah.
We look at that to make sure that we have the best composition.
Okay,
I
great.
think we try to make it as broad as possible and as inclusive as possible, especially for a study on inclusion. We need to make sure that we are inclusive. That's a good point. Thank you.
Great. I'm gonna start with Carrie.
Kerry Haney, Political Science and African American Studies. I have a comment and then a question. So the comment is, I think you should do some more intersectionality work in terms of the category, because you may be masking something that's happening there. So what about Black women? I mean, Sally presented last month, and with the survey results, when you look at women, they show a pattern, but Black women is a different pattern. So can you do that for the responders as well as for the categories that you're trying to assess? If we could do that and do that breakdown would be helpful, I think.
No, yeah, I agree. And I think David's team, to the extent that it's available for areas, is beginning to look at those intersections of identity. So I think I use the example of women of color, I think would be of particular interest.
We've analyzed all the survey questions, intersection. Okay. We're just waiting for REACT's guidance and what to report when you do intersectional analyses that multiplies the results. So you really need questions to know what to deliver.
Great, thanks. And then, so one of the things that concerns me, this is a new survey that includes staff, but we've had these types of surveys before. The one that Sally presented last month was every couple of years, we have that survey, and the patterns are not new. But what's happened between the last time that survey was administered and this time to deal with the patterns that we see? You outline a nice, I think, aggressive strategy. But what's going to happen between getting this strategy together and some of these concerns? For example, some data you might have, qualitative data, is get people together and ask them, right? I want to know for Black women and what Sally presented last month, what's going on? So simply collecting folks and having a discussion is one thing I would suggest, but let's not wait until we get, the perfect instrument, the perfect survey to start doing something about some of these issues I think are quite pressing.
I think that's a really important point. And I didn't mention this. I mean, we are going to make a commitment to report out from REACT about on a quarterly basis about where we are. And we started sort of talking about the extent to which we will do these things that we believe are in response to the data, and how do we know that will then change the outcome of these? And we don't, it may and may not to some degree. And it probably will take some time before we would see that a reaction to what's being done and the change.
Thank you.
I see lots of hands on, I will get to everyone at a certain point. I'm gonna start Stefan, and then I see Harvey, and then I'll go.
Right, Stefan Bass, Physics. So can you tell us a little bit how you plan to roll out this information to the individual units, college, departments? Yes, I mean, I'm already getting questions from my own faculty about it, but the only thing I've seen is what President Price has sent out and what you showed us here.
Yes, that's the plan. Now, there are going to be some constraints, to be honest here. It depends on the numbers, because we need to protect confidentiality of individuals. So all units will be able to work with the assessment subcommittee and also with the institutional research that is here to get the results. But the details are going to depend on the distribution, the number of people who participated in the survey from different groups. Is that right, David? That's going to be the constraints for us because we want to protect, we promised confidentiality to people.
I think the intention is to work through a format that would allow you some sense of relative placement, but also be, as opposed to just the absolute result. But the team is still working through the most effective means to develop a report and put it in the hands of the right. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, we've given prototypes to React and they're doing it.
Can you take questions from the Zoom?
Oh, yes, Harvey.
Yeah. Oh, hi, this is Harvey Cohen, Clinical Sciences. I just had a clarifying question. Exactly who was actually included in this survey? Initially, it said the university, and then you said not the health system. So what about like the School of Nursing, School of Medicine that are faculty like everybody else, not necessarily just health system?
Thank you for that question. This survey did include the School of Medicine and the School of Nursing, but it did not include the health system. And I think one of the things we will want to think about is how we might in the future imagine an enterprise-wide climate survey. The health system does do its own annual pulse survey. So we'll have to, think about how these two things might be brought together.
But faculty from the School of Medicine, for example, would have been included in this, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought, but it was confusing. We are part of the university, though.
Yes, and so this was, the scope was a part of the initial discussions because the School of Medicine is huge. We wanted it to be included, and so it is included, but we did not include the health system, non-School of Medicine health system.
Thank you.
You are certainly fully part of the university.
I thought, Leah, do you still have? And then I'll go to the back.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation. And I had 3 questions. One was what did we learn from the survey about the climate for LGBTQ plus people, if we have data on that? 2, on the infrastructure and policy slide, it looked to me like each of those bullet points were focused on racial equity. And I'm wondering what could go on that slide that might have a focus on gender and LGBTQ identity. And then the 3rd question was, are there, if I'm remembering right, there was an open-ended question.
Yeah.
Are there any findings that can be shared at this time from that open-ended question?
So the first question, so the Racial Equity Advisory Council will look at intersections of identity, but the focus is about racial equity. And I'll have David fill in more, but the results did indicate similar lower degrees of satisfaction among LGBTQ members of the community, both in terms of the climate and opportunities for advancement and their understanding of pay equity and those sorts of factors. So it was sort of similarly lower as the difference between men and women and what we saw in racial communities.
The infrastructure and policy slide was just about REACT. It wasn't about the climate survey results.
Yeah, the infrastructure, that was about.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. Okay.
Yes.
But what we want ultimately is really to foster an equity ethos in our community here. So you are equitable towards everyone. But this one was focused on racial equity, which is an acute issue and priority for us, but certainly for other groups as well. We need to make sure that we are paying attention to those groups as well.
From the
the information that Abbas shared about what people are looking for in terms of social interaction I think is a reflection of the free text of the qualitative information. But, and I think there was voluminous information which David's team has organized, and we'll be thinking about how we can share more of that in the
Yeah.
coming weeks.
We need to, we actually, people in IR have been going through that, and they have shared some results with us. The need to make sure that they protect anonymity. So maybe we need to paraphrase and do a lot of things just to make sure that we honor that in people. A lot of people contributed. About 50% of the people choose the free text option.
Profile of video molecular genetics and microbiology. Thank you for putting this together. I know it's a lot of work. And I have a question about the structure of the survey itself. And we're going to be putting so much effort in using this as our guide. I wanted to know, is the distribution of different underrepresented groups that responded to this survey the same as the composition of the entire universe? I'm concerned that maybe we are undercounting if people decide that they didn't want to answer the survey because they thought nothing was going to change.
That's a great question. And this came up in an earlier meeting, especially with respect to the staff, if we understand what kinds of roles are included in that number. So maybe I'll let David talk a little bit more about what we might know in response.
Yeah, at a high level, the population proportions correspond well to the respondent response rates. But we haven't yet drilled down to the level of, I think you're talking about, for example, we have ranked within executive, professional, clerical, service, that kind of thing. Yeah, there is a somewhat lower response rate at the lower ranks, so there could be some underrepresentation at that level. But overall, in terms of demographic groups and faculty rank, for example, the response rates for population proportions were close.
Will the raw data be released in some form?
No.
I mean, be identified?
No. We promised, this was the first time we're surveying the entire population, especially the staff. So we made extra efforts to reassure people that there would be no distribution of raw results to anybody in any form, that only IR staff were going to look at it. In future iterations, it's possible we could begin to relax that as we build trust. We're thrilled that we had a strong response rate from the staff the first time around. And I think the faculty response rate would have been even higher, but there was a climate survey in the fall of faculty. And so I thought 40% from the faculty was terrific, actually, under the circumstances. Yeah, and future iterations, I hope we can, people will trust us enough to still be candid, still have high response rates, and we can be more open with the data. But the first time through wasn't just my decision. It was we consulted with the campus side IRB and followed their guidance.
Marlise, I don't know if I can't see her.
Yeah, Marlise, would you like to?
Oh, there. Is there anything that you wanted to add on this question?
Yeah, I mean, I can't even see the data.
Okay.
And that's also just in terms of the competition.
So I have a quick question. Your use of the term microaggression, is it your understanding that that is being understood primarily?
So we did have a definition in the survey.
We did.
Yeah.
So following through that, many of the microaggressions that are talked about on campus are in speech acts, interactions, verbal interactions, and have a lot of people of osmosis that I don't think that everyone is as sensitive to what it means and how not to do it. And that not to say that some people are doing it not on purpose, but I think there are other people that would prefer not to do it if they could avoid it. And I think we can do a better job. We have people that can really help move that needle. But that means bringing not just our students to events that we have, like on discrimination and implicit bias, but bringing faculty and administration. this doesn't have to be painful. It can actually be very interactive and not terribly boring. So I just wanted to put that out there. That
I vote for terribly not boring. I agree with that statement. There's a lot that we can do in this space on the education. For example, I know some faculty I'm teaching this semester, for example, the first thing I did with my students is to talk about some ground rules for how we are going to engage with each other throughout the semester. We want to have vigorous debates, but we also want to have respect for debate, listen to everyone, not interrupt people, attack the idea and the person, lots of those things, just to make sure that everybody feels validated and that full participant in that classroom experience. So there are lots of the faculty meetings, some ground rules about how we engage with each other, not interrupt. Let's junior colleagues also weigh in, not overlook other people or things like that. So there are a lot of things that we can do when the intention is not to marginalize anybody. But there are situations, of course, where we have to do more, because when the intention is really to exclude somebody. So there is certainly a role for education, and here with the faculty coming, the faculty have a lot to do here, in my view. We need really to take some responsibility here. I mentioned this before. When we look at the data, you are going to see that sometimes complaints are about faculty, how they treat each other, how they treat staff, for example. So for us, as a steward of this institution through shared governance, we have a role to play there, and we need to step up as well.
Oh, name and department. I realize I'm forgetting to. Sure that's well.
Sorry.
I want to, yeah. Go. Can you call Joanne?
Joanne.
Unmuted. I just wanted to make the point that actually in the medical center, they've done a reasonably good job with some of the modules, trying to alert people to what the microaggressions are and what is acceptable conversation. It obviously has a bigger goal for both inner faculty, inner staff relationships, but also with our patients. So I think that it is, but it is something that has to be done over and over again. I think one point I saw from the survey was the importance of interactions. I mean, obviously the pandemic has put a pall on that, but I think that ultimately having true interactions, because the interesting thing that happens, I just finished doing difficult conversations interaction with the Rotary Club that had people of different races, different genders, different ages discussing. And what people had said was that they found that they interacted with no persons of another race outside of obligatory work relationships. And I think that it's obviously very difficult for people in a faculty, which is predominantly majority, to interact. But I think to make efforts to make that happen for all levels of our family, our group here at Duke is critical, to sort of make people aware of what is reasonable, what is good. And because we're from multiple socioeconomic groups, as faculty, as staff, and so forth, as well as multiple racial and ethnic groups. So more socialization, and that can be promoted by the departments, by groups within the department, that you don't just socialize with the people who look like you, because that's of course, that's the easiest thing to do, except for somebody like me, because they're not very many.
I was coming here from a session with Jane Afekwanigwe from the Truth Racial Healing and Transformation Center, and we were having this same conversation about how do you build community so that people have the opportunity, to your point, Joanne, to even practice when you find that social interaction is also, among homogeneous groups. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Ty Ginsburg, Asian and Middle Eastern Studies. I have two questions. First, whether the survey tested the intersection between question of race and question of job security. be predominant among staff over the past 2 years. The data is going to be released about the correlation between satisfaction and rank, especially among non-tenure track faculty. And the second one is how are we going to deal with social interaction when the university is trying to move some of its labor force to remote?
So with regard to the results, I mean, there will be opportunity. I mean, again, depending on whether it can, on how detailed it can be, whether it is at the school level, the divisional level. We are in Trinity, and my department as well. Or whether at the departmental level as well, to provide that the data that shows you, responses by rank, title, and things like that. That's something. If it is possible, yes, that's something we can do. So we can certainly do it at a higher level where we can, if it's not possible to do it at the small unit level. So that's on that. What's the other question?
Just to clarify, but the survey did not ask about whether people feel their job is secure, right?
No, we didn't, David. We didn't ask that question that way. I mean, we didn't ask about the
so there's
job
no way
security.
to correlate the answers received to whether people feel that they would have a position for job at Duke next year.
No, that was, we did not ask.
Okay, and the second question is, how do we deal with social interaction when we are trying to move some of the labor force to remote, especially staff? I mean, again, these two questions.
I cannot speak on, we cannot, both of us probably cannot speak on what decisions are being made, on how that is being rolled out, on what flexibility you need to have, and all those things. That's an important conversation about how we can provide flexibility, but at the same time develop a sense of community among our members, particularly new ones. We know, for example, our new faculty orientation over 2 years was over Zoom. That's not optimal way for somebody who doesn't know Duke. I remember talking with somebody and they said the Allen Building, and they had no idea what the Allen Building was after a few months here at Duke. And the reason is that because this person had been working remotely for like 6 months or so, didn't know, couldn't situate herself in the space here. So there are things that we can do, but this is where leaders have to be really creative. How to foster that sense of community. There are many ways to create social events. For example, in our office, we have a small staff which we meet every week over Zoom, but also sometimes we get an opportunity to get together, but now people are starting to come back. So we are trying to create opportunities to build community and mentor the junior members of our staff so that they get the career advancement and professional advancement that we're talking about. You need mentoring for that, you need support, you need lots of things. So this is a good conversation for us to have, and we have people at HR who can really give us good input and good practices on this, how to develop community while still providing flexibility for people who might need to work remotely, or the only way to retain some people, some talent, you have to provide that kind of flexibility. I think all organizations are dealing with this, I am sure. But this is, again, something for us to talk about. Thank you for raising that point because it's so important.
Yeah, the one footnote I would add to that is I think that as we understand better what we are doing in the space of building interaction, educating around microaggressions or whatever it is, I think we may learn more about some best practices in this kind of unusual moment where some people aren't here in person, and maybe be able to effectively share those ideas as we think about how we navigate this kind of new. Thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you who came in late today, if you missed the attendance sheet, please just come down to the front at the end to initial that you were here. Otherwise, I want to thank everyone for being here today. And I hope and wish everyone a good, enjoyable Thanksgiving and a restful holiday season. A quick reminder, we will not meet on December 2nd, and our next meeting will be on January 20th. And with that, we are adjourned.
Yay.